Hey folks, welcome to Hall of Fame interview. We have a very special guest. It's Aditya Mony. He's extremely seasoned in terms of tech. He's seen it all from large companies, large corporates, to fast-growing startups. And I've had the privilege of knowing him also on a personal level. We were sort of in the same apartment complex. So I'm introducing Aditya Mony, and he spent a significant chunk of his, I guess, a two-decade career in financial services, and now he's working for Servify, which is arguably a hot, blazing startup. Without further ado, Aditya, thank you so much for agreeing to come on to this conversation, and would kick off with the opening question. That is, can you talk a little bit about your journey, etc., leading to that point of taking the AI course, etc. Would love to know. I think the viewers would love to know a lot more about what happened and what led to that culmination.
Thanks, Jay. Thank you for having me over on a Sunday afternoon. Always a pleasure. Um, this is clearly a topic that's hot on everyone's minds. So I hope I do justice to it for all of the viewers here, and I'll share whatever experiences I've had and hope that they help you. I've had a career of over two decades. I was saying 2 years, maybe feels like that, but nevertheless, 2 decades. The
Don't
one
worry,
thing.
don't worry. You look like a fresher.
Oh, thank you so much. But the one thing is, you realize that technology is forever changing. I mean, especially if you're in the technology space, and that's a given. And the quicker you realize it, the better off you are. And it really instills in you the need for continuous learning. So, with that said, I started my career as a programmer analyst in a financial services company in the US after my master's in computer science. Went on to then work for other companies, some consulting and otherwise, but largely again staying close to the financial services space. This was with Siebel and the likes, where I was actually catering to deploying CRM solutions, etc., for customers. And then eventually in 2004, mid 2004, I relocated back to India and had the opportunity again to work with several large companies, and now with Servify, which is like you said, fast-growing startup. Definitely very exciting times. And when I really look back on my experience, everything from being an individual contributor to learning how to broaden your impact through other roles where you're getting things done through others as well, has been enriching. There are many failures, many things that you learn from. You pick up, you move on, and so on and so forth. And today, I think in the process, and I don't know if you want me to jump straight into it, but in the process, one of the key pivots, if you may, in my learning journey came with really the coming of AI. We were all talking about it. I remember late 90s, I was reading a book called The Age of Spiritual Machines. Maybe I've told you this, Jay. I don't even remember now. This is Ray Kurzweil's book. That really got me thinking. Subsequently read books like Prey by Michael Crichton and others. And I clearly like my fiction, but that also kept me motivated on just really looking at how things evolve. Technology has always been fun, something I've enjoyed, something trends that I've watched very closely. And it was, these slow, subtle changes, these email filters, spam filters, to now in Google, the replies, auto replies that you get and things like that. All of these really led me to say, okay, there's something fundamental that's changing in this space. And if we don't really, stay on top of it, you're not going to be able to, stay the course with it and probably even direct it, right, in terms of, what you want to go and achieve. So somewhere maybe about I would say 2017 is really when the bug bit me. I said, okay, I've been in senior roles, I've been in a general manager kind of a role, I've been in, I was CTO in one of the financial services companies. So one would say by all means that I had arrived and there wasn't really much more to do. But then reality is that you become irrelevant like that. Boom, right? I mean, if you don't stay the course and stay with what we were doing. And clearly, in the banking financial services space, fintech was hot, insurtech was hot, lots of disruptions. And the fundamental questions in front of me as a leader that were coming up were, how do you pick a solution? How do you know what's better than the other? How do you know whether you want to continue investing on a solution for something or you want to stop? Because each of these things take effort, take money, take all of that, right? And that's when I realized that I wasn't really coding, I wasn't doing any of that. But if we are talking of replacing a quant model with an AI-based model for prediction, or if you're looking at things where you're looking at a lot of processing and figuring out patterns, from a technology standpoint, sometimes it could be infrastructure anomalies, sometimes it could be something else. All of these things always would land up at a decision point. Should we invest in it or should we not? Or of the multiple choices that we've got, which one should we pick? And these were things that I was, realizing that I was not well equipped to handle. And that's what prompted me to, go down this path and take the course. One of the courses that really helped me. But then again, we'll talk more about that later. But hopefully that gives you some context on a little bit of my background and motivation for what I picked.
No, brilliant. Actually, that's I didn't know this, that you started out as a programmer. It's very seldom that, I mean, that's the organic path. Like you start obviously in the bottom of the pyramid and sort of work your way up. That's ideal. That's what I would assume most leaders do that, in the CTO capacity, etc. But so that means you've seen, like, literally walked the path, the chain of command. And so want to circle back to the focus of that one piece of thread, you did embark on, which is in 2017, when you felt you might become irrelevant, and also at this on the left side you have this interest coming in, spam filters were being mailed. I've also experienced that, and I think very mildly. I was also in financial services, financial space, and I saw the competence being built, the buzzwords, but only some of the leaders actually started taking action, and the rest were sort of laggards. I mean, obviously, without naming names, can you sort of maybe talk about two things? Some leaders are actually very aggressive, they're good, but they also have a first principles approach where they invest their personal time, money, and somebody in your sort of high up the order wouldn't really want to sacrifice their weekends. You have a lot of commitments, etc. But talk us about that phase, when you took the plunge to paying for a course, doing the whole 9 yards, etc., and walking the talk, etc. So what were the just maybe 3 months, 4 months prelude to that to actually trigger that decision point? And talk us a little bit about your mindset at that time.
You talk first principles, so I'm going to tee off a little on that and then come back to answering your question. One of the things that I generally look for when I hire people, right, when I bring them on board, is really what kind of a learning journey have they had? What kind of investments they've made, and in what capacity? Have they gone through formal training? Have they spent time practicing on their own? Have they competed in different things online, or maybe other competitions, etc.? Something that really lends credibility to their growth, their learning and growth. And unless you have that conviction and discipline, you're not really going to be able to make it. So I mean, there's the next new shiny object. You try and do certain things, you do a little bit of it, and then boom, it's gone, right? So unless you stay the course with it, it makes it very difficult. So that made it a very difficult choice for me, because this was not something that was an adjacency straight out to what I was doing. It required me to actually make a fundamental change in the way I was going to basically be looking at things, which meant that I had to spend time brushing up my maths, my statistics, looking at specific nuances of different models and different kinds of things that were underway. And it starts with really understanding what I was trying to achieve. Like I shared with you earlier, if my objective would have been to just get something, get a job, and that's higher paying, I would probably, yes, want to get a certification. Maybe I'd do some of that, but then I'd also like to back that up with a good capstone project or something like that, where people can see my output meaningfully as well, right? Not just a certificate, something that actually demonstrates the kind of work I've done and builds on my portfolio. Now, again, that's not easy. So, I had to think really about my willingness to make a commitment to something like this. I was in a leadership role. The pressures generally in those roles tend to be enormous. Timelines are not defined. If there are production issues, if many of you have gone through it, you know what that means. Your completely planned day goes haywire. So all of those things do happen. But at the same time, people who really been able to make a difference still make time and make that commitment and make that disciplined commitment at that, right? So when I asked myself if I was really willing to give up the next maybe 14, 15 weekends, if I remember right, I think that's what the course took.
Yeah.
At the onset, it seemed like, wow. But then I had other, friends and colleagues who had actually gone through it. So while it may have been a big deterrent early on, I think just knowing that someone else had also done it, probably others who are in similar roles to mine and stuff, and we would talk about these kinds of things. That was also good motivation. So I'll completely admit, maybe I would have been a little hesitant to begin with, but then when I saw others doing it, I said, okay, why the heck not? Why can't I do this? I mean, what will happen? I'll drop out of the course. Okay, fine. But at least I'll try. If I don't try, then I've already dropped out.
Yeah.
So it's a question of really taking that first step. I took the first step. It was a lot of fun going into a university kind of an environment. It's actually sometimes a great stress buster as well when you actually switch off from your regular work to something where you're learning.
It's a good excuse to stay away from spouse and family for 2 days.
Hey, I'm not saying anything there. Don't get me on that. No, but seriously now, just the ability to go and do that, left me with the feeling that I was actually making significant investments in myself.
Awesome.
And that investment in yourself is probably one of the best things that you can do. It's not money, it's not anything else. It's time for yourself. It's time to do things that you want to do. And in the industry that we are in the profession that we are in terms of technology, at least, I mean, that's something that you have to constantly do. And probably now it's no longer just technology; it's practically everything, right? Expertise is valued across the board. So one of the other things I also wanted to share was I had the opportunity through the different roles that I played to also do things around strategy or to do things that were business facing. And I quickly realized that innovation or technology and all of these come to a naught if you really are not delivering business value, right? There has to be a value impact. And that's something that I've learned. I had the opportunity and pleasure to learn a little earlier in my career, and that really helped me. So when I looked at it from this perspective, I was also thinking of, hey, maybe I bring this knowledge back into a startup of my own, or I bring this, thing into something that I want to do over the next 5-10 years of my life from then on, right? And that's what got me really motivated, because then I was not looking at what's my immediate 1 year impact to this. It was really what kind of foundation can I lay that will actually help me set up stage for probably even the next decade of my career. Who knows how things will change there? Even that's a long time, but nevertheless, it was not something that was like a immediate short thing. So when I took that decision, yes, it was tough. I had growing children, family that hardly you get time to be with only on the weekends. But I was also at that stage where my teenagers that time, or maybe the early teens, were already finding their own space and way, and they want to do things. They want to be on their own. Parents were an embarrassment, so I said, okay, let me use that as an excuse. But nevertheless, I did that. I took the plunge, and this was a good experience. It was basically almost a full day from morning to evening. You carry your lunch over, or you go and grab lunch there, or whatever, right? And when you head back, you got this nagging thing of, oh, I got to finish homework by the next weekend, and you've also got work and stuff. But I found it much more easier to go and do that because that was directly lending itself into a professional advantage than something where I may have just been doing, something on the side just for the sake of, right? And the difference really is conviction. It could even be a hobby, and in that hobby, you could spend a heck of a lot of time and do stuff in there if you're fully behind it. I quite enjoy cooking, for example. So I don't take away from that. I do that. I find time for that sometime or the other. And just like that, I mean, that's much smaller though. This was really a big investment, and it was something that I was very keen to make.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad I was able to make it too.
No, awesome, phenomenal. I just wanted to, spotlight a little more about one thought that I got, listening to you, etc. Which is, so let's take the spectrum of leadership, right? Like such as you, etc. Now on the left, you have, I would say an army of people not upskilling, continuing to be in the spot, and there's nothing wrong. In that trajectory, they have the fear of being redundant, etc., but they do nothing about it because also the escape velocity is very high for you because of the prices you said you have to pay, like the personal life, and there's like the monetary deterrent. There's so many resistances. From that all the way to the right side, which is folks who upskill and then who also jump to startup roles, or maybe who even start up, or maybe even salesmanship, right? Which is like I would say what I think is a perfect intersection of your competence going full scale, because that's where I would think Elon Musk is, because he's also a salesman, he's selling the technology. So in this entire spectrum, I wanted to ask you, because you've had the good fortune of seeing a lot of folks, and I'm sure you've wondered, hey, why are these guys not upskilling themselves? If not this course, some other course. What's wrong with these guys? Like, I would really go and be a little indelicate here and say that, because I mean, first principles would assume that you should constantly upskill in tech, but like I said, I see bevy of people with slightly the incorrect attitude. Do you want to have a take on that?
Yeah. So in the larger organizations that I was in some there was a bigger focus on continuous learning and innovation versus others. Um, it really also depends on what kind of organization you're in, right? Generally, a product organization will need to look at continuous evolution and stuff. So inherently in the DNA, you've got a lot of that baked in, and people are constantly looking at better ways of doing things and stuff. And when I say product, I mean generally around the technology space. However, when you look at business outcome, maybe banking, financial services, like I talked of, there is a lot of innovation there as well. I mean, you've seen fintechs are not there for no reason, right? I mean, there's clearly a lot of opportunity there, a lot of things there as well. But there's also a lot of antiquated ways of doing things, a lot of legacy technology and stuff. And I think the more newer age companies, I mean, I wouldn't say newer age now, but let's say even 2-3 decades ago, the ones that actually came up with the internet and everything else are the ones that have kind of kept pace, and they realize that they need to keep pace like that. So that's why they are still not irrelevant, even though there are much more newer companies that are going and doing disruptions, significance. But when you take a look at companies that are focused on other lines of business and using technology more as a tool, I think that's where a lot of the disruption also comes in with respect to newer ways of doing things. And what happens in a lot of these organizations is if you worked in a specific role or a domain, you tend to become an expert in that domain. But then you are a frog in a well. And you're just sitting there baking and baking, and probably there's hot water all around you, and you're just in that hot water, and you just don't know when it'll boil, and you'll just go belly up, right? There are many cases where people who really resisted change or who've not been willing to work with, for example, the transition to agile, or in any of these things, they've found themselves clearly on the side, and not being able to make any difference or contribute and stuff. And that's just one of the key examples. Agile is something that most companies have embraced over the last 2 decades, and it's just that you need faster outcomes and faster business value. So when I looked at people from that perspective, they largely fell into, I would say, 3, maybe 4 groups. There are the early adopters who are always keen to jump on and do stuff. And in those early adopters as well, you'll find some people who are impressed with the next new shining object, do a little bit, and then they stop. Versus some who do it and then they sustain. And then you've got the folks who are slow adopters when they see others around them that they look up to, or change advocates essentially. Then they'll follow them and they'll do stuff. And then there are these naysayers who are just sitting completely on the fence saying, no, this is just not the way to do it. I'm very happy doing it the way I want to, and I'm glad to continue doing it. Don't give me a promotion, don't do this, don't do that. But reality is, all of them just get completely pushed to the side, because when you got others who are able to get things done much more effectively and efficiently, which system will sustain incompetence? Which system will sustain inefficacy in terms of getting things done? So in some of those, the second category, I'm not calling the first two where some started in the early adopters that went this way or that. In the second category, I realized that we had to create some sort of a motivation for them, a nudge, and that nudge could actually take them further along. Now, as a leader in the organization, I couldn't just say I'm only going to get it done with this group. I had to really make sure that the entire group gets there, right? And communication was key. Showing them the path was key. Showing them how careers would progress was key. And I'm not talking just AI. I'm talking in general. And then what we also did was we created some. There's if you broadly think of influencing tactics, there's personal motivation, social motivation, and structural motivation. Structural motivation comes with all of your maybe comp structures or whatever else stuff. Social motivation comes from getting recognized in front of your peer group and others that, hey, you're doing something that's others are look up to and stuff. And then you got personal motivation where you're either driven by that inherent need to go and change or do something and learn, or maybe for want of better pay or for trying out something different, changing their roles, whatever. I think it's important to really understand that each individual has and can fall in any of these areas as part of the spectrum. And at an organization level, for me, it was extremely important to start to understand where, if I have 100 people, where would they really fit in, which of these categories? And then the techniques to nudge them were very different. And there were still always some kind of people who said, no, I just don't want to do it this way. And very quickly we said, okay, then we don't want you here. that's literally how you go, because if there is no willingness to go align with an organization strategy or no willingness to contribute to or evolve it, what's the point?
Okay,
that's basically what we looked at. I don't know if that.
No, that's it's actually a multitude of dimensions you're looking at, and I think you've laid out much better than me in terms of how leadership thinks, etc. Which comes to rewinding back a little bit, taking two steps back to that time in 2017, when you actually took the plunge. There are typically some resistances, right? Before joining a course, and some I would say esoteric or erudite course like AI, you have these thoughts like, hey, I'm not good in stats. It's probably 10-15 years since I've done programming. It's also maybe I'm not good in probability. I'm just making it up. I'm not too sure if you have that. But talk a little bit.
I had my share. Don't worry, I had my share.
Yeah, exactly. So talk about and then
years.
Exactly. So talk us about those resistances, those perceived resistances, and actually you've had the good fortune of again.
My own or perceived resistance for anyone?
No, for you. 2017, your perceived resistances, and actually, looking back in hindsight, which of them were true and which of them were not true. Yeah.
Okay. So I mean, you start. Like I said, I started with hesitation, but then I kind of was almost nudged by my friends who said, "Hey, they've gone and done it, or they're enjoying it," because I could see that during the week also a couple of them would just get together and talk about problems and stuff. So there's a certain sense of excitement also. So you say, "Hey, you know what? This is something that I don't know anything about," and I'm using the word anything very loosely to say I don't know anything about, because it's an entire domain. Yeah. It's an entire thing that you can speculate. You can say you know it. I think even right now I'm only scratching the surface, but there's so much to learn and understand. And I think what I was very apprehensive about was, first, am I going to be able to make the time? And am I going to be able to do justice to this? Because this is not cheap. Right? The course itself is not cheap either. It required commitment in terms of time, in terms of money, in terms of time away from other things that I could be doing. And it was a holistic investment that I had to make.
Yeah.
And there were those doubts around whether I will have sustenance power. Will I be able to go through 14 weekends? Can you imagine? So, that was stuff. Or looking at, hey, will I be able to do it? What if my work spills over to the weekend? What if I'm not good enough? What if I'm in a peer group where all these youngsters and everyone else has gotten it all done? Boom, boom, boom. I'm like, okay, what the heck are they talking about? So yes, there were all those fears. But then I also said, look, I think if I don't try, then I'm already giving up.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, let me try. Let me go through it. And maybe, I would say first 3, 4 classes, this is fairly well paced. I think the course was constructed well. It allowed for a good amount of um, integration into the curriculum, knowing that you got people from different backgrounds coming in and trying to do this. So it's not something where you get into an IIT coaching and there's a boom boom boom, let's go, let's get all of this going. No, not like that, but it was something that really built up over time, and you realize that if you would not invested in each of those classes upfront, you would at some point start to fall back in the exercises and stuff. And I did my own share. I mean, I could not complete a few things. I think I struggled with a few things, but then there are again things that I could do. And the amount of pleasure that you get in being able to say, "Hey, I did this," and I think one of them was really a one, maybe a couple of them were good examples where as a team we were working on getting certain things done, and everyone had to contribute, everyone had to pull their own weight to get things done.
Yeah.
And someone was trying out a different model, someone was trying out a different maybe I think with XG Boost or with something. It was all fun. It was fun to understand this. While I would have also enjoyed probably some level of debriefing after all of that fun, just so that we could get to thinking why someone tried something in a certain way and stuff. We did some of it. We could have done a little more, but that's the part where you've got to make your additional investment beyond what the course just conducts for you. So to me, yes, there were things where I felt that I would have a fundamental gap in terms of skill set. I would have a fundamental gap in terms of being able to meet my commitments from a course perspective. And yeah, I think those were things. There are some that I made through, some that I did not. I think but overall, all in all, I feel good about it. I feel that it opened up my horizon, my perspective. I could see different sub sciences within what we were looking at. And it was a very high level course anyway, but when an 18-weekend course gives you only so much, right? I mean, there's people dedicating years of their life to this, so there's a heck of a lot more also to come in there. So.
Perfect, which is an interesting segue to the next question, which is talk us. So we finished pretty much the pre-course and we've definitely mentioned during course. So it's the post-course. So talk us about that transformation, like, and it's maybe if you can, sprinkle or touch upon any 1 or 2 use cases. So it's the same office. I remember that you continue to work, obviously for the same company, the financial services company, etc. But this is an interesting parallel could be made about, people who go to like a weight loss program, they go somewhere and then suddenly they come back, and then the old t-shirts or the shirts start fitting. But more importantly here, like what was different in terms of going back to office? How did you start seeing problems differently?
Yeah, it's great. I'll just actually talk of a change in role also that I undertook around the same time.
Okay, yeah.
Not influenced by this course and not it's just something that kind of happened together, or probably maybe I was in the early month or 2 of my new role when I'd taken this on. I don't remember now. I mean, some element in there. But I'd actually essentially shifted from looking at development of applications to a point where I was now running applications in production. So I was actually managing a lot of these applications, many of which that my team hadn't built in production. And you look at a variety of problems. You've heard of AI ops. You look at a variety of problems such as capacity planning, such as when you're looking at incidents, there's incident detection, then there's diagnosis, then there's restoration of services, and then finally you resolve the main thing. So when you look at each of these things, incident detection becomes important. But again, when you're looking at that as well, how do you get from reactive to proactive to preventive? So a lot of the elements, and it's not that I did not know that there's application of all of that in the field that we were looking at, but it just made me a little more equipped to say, hey, now I can speak the language. I mean, I know the idea, but now I can speak the language. And then it allowed me to experiment in a few cases with people who were very hungry to learn and try out different things, many of whom had not gone through any formal courses, but were still doing things on their own. They were experimenting and stuff. So, I had the opportunity to pull a couple of them together and work on small problems in different areas. And we got to a point where we built up certain capabilities that allowed us to look at operational insights and things like that. That got you to a point where you could predict a likely failure in certain things. I
Wow.
saw a brilliant automation video from Ericsson that was doing the rounds on WhatsApp and stuff at that point. And in this video, this man comes in here. He's talking about this Ericsson's, this large telecom company that was actually going, building managing networks, and they had built up stuff. And just that year alone, I think they probably filed about, this particular team had filed about 14 patents and stuff, in that field, where they literally, and if I have a video, I'll share it with you, Jay, anyway, but they literally looked at a variety of input points,
Yeah.
and they built up an interface which was voice-based, and the operational manager would essentially just interact with the system over voice, and the system would say, hey, you know what, there's a power outage in Florida, and we're going to basically look at providing backup equipment there. I mean, no, sorry, there's a storm warning. There's likelihood of a power outage. We'll send out backup equipment there so that there's minimal time to actually any disruption, and we will manage all of this in an automated manner. And it just seems so futuristic and so unreal, and you realize that that's all happening today. And it's such a wake-up call, because it tells you, oh shit, this is happening. And we may be looking at subtleties, but people who are effectively able to utilize all of the power, whatever is in there, are able to bring in a lot of things together. Now,
Yeah.
Absolutely not an easy thing to achieve. I mean, we talk of AI being able to provide or cater to certain skills, but has it really gotten to a point where it can supplement or replace human intelligence? Yeah, I mean, the jury's out. Not probably by a mile, right? I think a lot of work needs to happen in that area, but nevertheless, there are changes that are happening. There are a lot of inefficiencies, a lot of logic-based things that you would look at this, look at that, look at this, look at that. All of that's automated, and along with that automation, now because of the volumes of data that you're collecting, you're also able to arrive at patterns,
Yeah.
and based on those patterns, you now realize that, oh shit, if this is the kind of data that I have and this is the kind of pattern that I'm seeing, then I have high confidence that if I see similar data elsewhere, the same pattern will apply. So that's essentially saying, okay, I'm predicting a potential outcome for something, based on stuff that I've already learned or I've already seen. So, I mean, that was the thing that I want to call out. I don't know if that answered your question, or I digressed.
No, I mean, I think that's superb in that seems like a lot of opportunities. First off, lots of events that were, I mean, I would want to use the word black and white started, there's a lot of more flavor of color coming in. Simply because your perception, your view, you become more equipped, etc. Your competence, obviously, by your own admission has increased. See, and then you're also able to maybe shape, like you said much earlier, the discourse quality, where it's going, etc. And also inspired by Ericsson or what other companies said. You're also able to view competition and understand them, because sometimes it's Greek and Latin. If you don't know, I still don't understand, for instance, quantum computing or some of blockchain, because we're not conversant in that language, right? So. I think
so. It's like this, right? I mean, looking at all of these things helps you understand that somewhere you've got to sow the seed.
Yeah.
I think what I was able to do was sow the seed in a couple of areas.
Okay.
I wouldn't say that any of those things, maybe except for one, any of those things successfully got to fruition before I left. But I do know that things continue to evolve, which is good, because I think just being able to see some of those things and understand them, and probably it was learning for me as well, right? Now I'm able to probably think a little further ahead. There were situations where I was now able to appreciate the kind of automation that went into the e-discovery space.
Okay.
Or a lot of legal documentation. So there's, I mean, legal help required to pour over all these documents and arrive at and identify issues is expensive. And some of the work that was done in this area significantly helped replace or tighten that down, including the time window for getting things done.
Yeah.
So I mean, yes, it was very clear. I started to see, when you're looking for something and you like a car, you start to see many of those around like that. When you start looking at something like this, you start to notice that there's so many other things happening all around you. I think I just became a lot more aware to things like that.
Yeah.
That's basically.
Exactly. I mean, myself included. Suddenly, the newspapers or the books my proclivity towards AI, machine learning, suddenly I wasn't like afraid of them anymore. I mean, heck, I was afraid of Python. Like I, my own sort of handicap in that
You
I
mean the
thought
snake or?
exactly. So I was like, what is Anaconda? So I think you start building. So first is awareness, and then education, and then you start making thesis around them. Yeah. So which is again a segue to the next question. I know that you probably weren't on the market, interviewing right away, etc., which is typically what most leaders also do, right after upskilling, or some continue to stay. But I want to talk about your, the gradient, or the gradient ascent or the descent. I'm sure it's an ascent to the startup world, because that's an enormous leap. I also know as a friend that you told me it's through your close friend or a friend that you got this tremendous opportunity. But talk us about that mindset a little bit in terms of that huge leap of faith. I think transitioning to any startup is very difficult, especially in such a when you're entrusted with a big role. And B, now how did the AI course or your own new capability sort of help you unlock that opportunity? What's your strategy right now with this company? And which is a segue to the final question, which is how are you seeing the next 5 years in terms of AI?
Yeah, so let me start by calling out that even in the role that I was in earlier, I had to start bringing in people with that expertise.
Okay.
So while I was not directly myself in the market or looking for things, I was bringing in people with that mindset, because again, it was fundamentally around driving transformation, around being able to make sure that we are actually gearing a mindset which was largely around, hey, technology innovation, next new shiny object, to value innovation. Because ultimately, all of this, if it doesn't really translate into value, is going to amount to nothing, and it'll not get the sustained investment. So what I started really understanding, and when I interviewed people and stuff, I think the people who would actually meaningfully embrace this journey were able to talk a lot more about the business impact that they were making. I mean, I'm sure, for example, if you think of data scientists, you know that a lot of data scientists in companies, I mean, it's a hit or a miss. You do it well. Data science is a high-paying job, yes, but then sustenance. I mean, if you're really not able to drive the right outcome, you're not going to be around for long. So, and just imagine what that does to your confidence. If you're an individual who's just going and doing this for the sake of and get a certificate and just get something, and yes, you cracked a great job, but then you find that you're just not able to meet the need there, and then what are you going to do? I mean, it's going to beat you down on your confidence, and then just recovering from that is going to take you a heck of a long time too.
Yeah.
So you're better off really going down the path of looking at what makes sense to you and then investing yourself holistically.
Yeah.
Right? And I think my initial desire or outcome that I expected from this course was to really broaden my horizons and let me be able to absorb what's happening around. There were companies we were evaluating, there were fintechs that we were looking at, there were models in our existing systems that we were looking to change. And I mean, the same questions remain. How do you select, A versus B? Or let's say you've gone ahead with A, and 3 months later, there's this hot new company that comes along and says, oh, I've got this fantastic AI and stuff. Now, do I just break away from A and go to B? How do I make that decision? How do I really look at what's valuable, what's not, and is this really worth making? I think those kinds of changes and that kind of thought process started coming in, and I was able to, I won't say fully get to a very refined output, but really I got to a point where I was able to at least make some intelligent decisions, right? Given the information that we had. So that helped, and that kind of continues even now. So, for example, in the startup world, there are multiple dimensions. Technology is key. It's the underpinning of what we do, especially in what we do at Servify. I think it's really helping us bring an entire ecosystem together. It's helping us understand a lot of nuances that are difficult to if you don't really have the technology to bring those insights and stuff. And really, when you look at the use of machine learning, I mean, I'll start with machine learning. If you're really not collecting the right data, then what kind of AI will you even build? So
Yeah.
I think understanding what data is in there, understanding whether this is the right data that will actually form the basis for models and other capabilities that you want to build out is important. It'll also be around things that you decide or you refine over time to say, hey, you know what, maybe these areas, as I'm engineering this product, these areas I really need to light up the indicators, the data elements that will actually really help me derive the insights. Now, whether those insights exist or not, I don't know, but at least start to light them up. So those kinds of things already as a company at Servify we were doing. In fact, we were using image processing for diagnosis or looking at certain elements of a particular device and understanding health, etc. And that continues to this day. There are a lot of other elements also from a process standpoint that I'll refrain from going into too much detail on, primarily because again, you also realize that you're building up intellectual property. You're also building up patents. All of these things add to valuation increase of the company. So there are a variety of different things that you would look at. And startup is fundamentally different in that you're no longer with a big engine and working along with it. You are the engine. If you don't really set that up, then you can't. I mean, I had someone reach out to me and say, hey, I'm looking for a leadership role. I said, leadership in a startup is when you're willing to go and sit in the front bench, do the job, and show it to them in terms of how it's done. That's what leadership is. If you can't do that, then it's difficult. So I think that, it's immense amount of learning for me as well, right? I mean, as much as you learn, you also have to unlearn a lot of things. So there are new things there that you go through. And, I realize now that the reason why a lot of startups and a lot of people in this space are able to go and make a difference is because they're starting with very little baggage. But then the challenges that come up ahead is, I mean, one of the biggest challenges for AI, for example, and this is, you're asking me also about, the outlook. Biggest challenges is data. Collecting data without a doubt. But what data? Is it protected by privacy requirements? Can you really anonymize it? Can you really use it? There are contractual obligations. There are people who would say you can do this, you can't do this. There's jurisdictions. There are you can only use data in a certain environment. You build up learning repositories. Learning repositories have to be within the confines of a specific boundary, right? I mean, so you start to look at all of those elements and you realize, and then there's ethical elements of all of this as well. So you of course heard the various cases where you got bots going rogue and things like that, right? Just generally in the industry. So I think when you look at all of that, the maturity in AI is definitely going to be something that will come in. It's already happening to some degree across the next 5 years. I would absolutely see that happening. But I also see it being strife with challenges, especially around data privacy and protection. So I think that's also going to be an important element. Data classification is going to be extremely important. What is personal data? What is non-personal data? Is it okay to anonymize any of those? I mean, personal data aside, but even non-personal data. And is that considered something that you can actually leverage or not? So I think those elements will all come in, and they already are. I mean, it's not like it's not there. I mean, these are all things that everyone's dealing with, and especially with even the upcoming laws in India around data protection, etc. So I think those are things that to me are big elements, but I also see that some of the larger companies that have been at it now for a decade or so already and are snapping up companies that have actually been looking at specific nuanced areas will definitely build up a war chest around this. And they will, in many senses, with the kind of control that they have over that data, will be able to actually go and build up a whole lot of better models and things like that. So today, for example, even something as simple as a Google automated response, the damn thing predicts for you what sentence you should write back. Right? I mean, to me, it may seem like a very subtle thing, but can you imagine how much of data it's actually gone through already? How much of your emails, mine, other data and stuff it's gone through? I mean, again, those are all elements that one also has to understand. So, I think largely smaller companies will continue to do this, but they'll also go through the same learning curve where they start off with a lot of innovation, but then eventually they find that they also will have to get to some sort of a regulated area, because this is going to become increasingly important, and data privacy is regulated now across the world. Then you will look at larger organizations that will actually use a lot of their muscle to go and push forth some very pioneering capabilities out, while also probably helping set the benchmark and standards for what is acceptable and not acceptable. I'm not saying that they will necessarily go and set up everything, but I think just the experience of seeing them go at it with regulators or regulators, and all of that will actually help shape the industry in terms of what can and cannot be done. There will also be elements where we are looking at application of a lot of AI in very mundane areas.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the fundamental path, right? You start with very simple, what starts off as robotic process automation, and then kind of go up there to cognitive automation, etc. So I think that entire path, that journey, and bringing in critical, deep business insights that can actually help create that differentiation for you. Today, you got a portfolio management system, investment thing based on AI. You got robotic advisors. I mean, you're doing all kinds of things. That's already in place today. So I think it's a question of really seeing how these models become more widespread. And I think next 5 years, I think that's what's going to happen. Beyond 5 to 10 years, I fully expect that we will see a lot more mainstream AI. And by that time, we will actually figure out how to deal with it, how to manage it. I'm hoping. There's still a lot to learn and do that, but I think that's kind of what I'm thinking. I don't know that.
I mean, very extremely prescient. I also agree with many of the sort of other points in terms of the regulatory space. As you know, there's a healthcare company that also I'm doing, and the first thing is it's also fascinating to know that the regulation tech has also evolved very fast. For instance, now you get FDA approvals in like 3 to 6 months for vaccines. That's something unheard of. Typically the journey would be like 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. In fact, pharma companies raise rounds of money based on that predicate. But that's risen meteorically. Something not.
I think COVID's been a major accelerator for a lot of that.
Exactly. So and also in terms of the privacy, etc. With the whole GDPR coming in and most of the other companies following suit, etc. I think there's some extremely good and financial services. I mean, they've been checkered with. I mean, the albatross is huge in terms of privacy, etc. But now there's interesting innovation happening there as well. So what's maybe one mistake you can share? Jeff Bezos calls it regret minimization framework, but what is that one regret if you had to dial back to one point of time over the last 3-4 years, specifically coming to AI, etc.? Some thesis gone wrong, some big budget.
No, I think one regret is I should probably invested in a lot more experimentation earlier.
Okay.
I think there's no substitute to actually trying things out and doing things.
Yeah.
Or getting them done. It doesn't matter. I mean, point here is that you think AI, there's time, you can go do this, you can go do that. I think, but reality is, you close your eye and open your eye, and there are multiple companies around you that are unicorns already. Take a look at this year. So you start to see a lot of the stuff that's actually happening, the disruption that's happening. It is a lot of the companies are significantly counting on AI. So we're driving that, and my one regret would be that I haven't experimented enough even now. I mean, there's a heck of a lot to do.
Awesome. That's incredibly candid and obviously forthcoming for everybody out there. So I think my request would also be the same, in that continue to experiment. There's no substitute to act, and also viewing failure as literally like fail your way to success. So you want to get into the thesis mode, saying 4 out of 5 experiments are not going to run. So it's law of large numbers kicking in, wherein you really want 10 experiments, 20 experiments, and allocate the budget, etc. What's
failures? I mean, you want to get to a mode where no doubt failure is a fantastic feature, right? And crisis is an excellent opportunity to learn also, right? But you want to fail fast and learn. Fail fast and learn. Fail fast and learn. That's okay. Failing is fine. Don't be shy of failure, but fail fast. Don't stay in that state of limbo, for long, and then you realize that you've lost resources, you've lost time, all of that. Right? So fail fast.
Yeah, perfect. I mean, I think that warrants your Servify warrants another complete session on its own. I'm not going to cannibalize this time about this. Now coming back to we're almost at the last 2 questions. So this is the last but one, the penultimate question, which is, what would you tell yourself if you were 24 or 25-year-old and trying to just upskill either this machine learning AI or something else? What would you tell yourself? Meaning essentially, what would you tell a fresher?
I would I would, strongly suggest you're a sponge in the early years of your career, right? Let's say the first 3, 4 years, um, and be a sponge, absorb multiple things around you, but then get to a point and experiment with multiple things, right? Because you don't know what path you want to go behind. But once you do make that decision, once you do agree that you want to go and make an investment in something, embrace it wholeheartedly, right? Don't do a partial investment in it, because then you're only going to get a partial return, if at all, right? Or probably nothing at all. You really, if this is something that you want to invest in, AI, ML, you've got to commit to continuous learning over many years. It's not just going to be one course. I think if you're thinking of one course that's going to get you in, it'll get you in there, but then you'll fall flat on your face if you're not really able to sustain it, if you're not able to experiment. And that's going to be a disaster for you, right? More than anything else, that's going to be a disaster for you. It's going to beat up your confidence, like I mentioned earlier. So embrace it fully, go in with full conviction. You're 24, so there's really not much to lose, right? But go in there with full conviction, do it, do all you can. There will still be a time that you'll realize, hey, maybe this is not for me, and that's okay. But at least you'll know you've gone in there with full intent to get things done, and you've come to that conclusion, so there'll be no regret. But yeah, I think that's what I would strongly recommend.
That's fantastic. Yeah. So more conviction, guys. Do whatever you do, just do it really well. Do that one thing very well. Yeah. And then coming to the last question, which is what's next for you? As in, are you going to go breadth first, like in terms of upskilling, continue to pick up other technologies or whatever, or go depth first, as in, so I mean, when I say breadth first, it's really like, are you going to go horizontal, maybe make your own company, etc., or are you going to go depth first? Continue to stick around in this. Maybe pick up, I don't know, blockchain or quantum computing, etc. Where does your heart lean at this time?
So in the near future, there's no doubt. I think we've got our hands full. We've got a growing global company. There's lots to learn, lots to do. I'm very excited about what I'm doing today and where I am today. Not everything is known, so that's what makes it very unnerving, but at the same time exciting, because you've got to go learn and do it.
Yeah.
So there is continuous learning every single day, right? Some technology, some not technology also. And in fact, a lot of it now is not technology. It's about really how do you even make something valuable, something meaningful, something that delivers value to an ecosystem, consumers, customers, etc. So I think that's where the impact of technology, impact of product, impact of all of that really comes to play, and that's where my heart is, right? In terms of figuring out really how we can drive that. Imagine an experience where you are you want to do something and something is done for you with very little to no effort from. Behind the scenes, that's not straightforward. It'll require a heck of a lot of other things. It would require a significant amount of AI. When we are moving to voice-based interfaces, every one of us has now got a voice assistant on our phones. We are, getting things done. I say, call Jayanth. I don't even dial. I don't even put down your number. I just say, call Jayanth, and I can call you. So that kind of convenience is here to stay. Today, when your fixed line phone at home goes bad, you're like, oh shit, that should work. Why has that gone bad, right? Because it's just so much of a utility today. I think it's the same thing. With a lot of what we are doing, it may not be apparent, but people and consumer behavior and everyone's behavior is fundamentally changing. They expect to see this as utility. They expect to have things work.
Yeah.
You order something up on a food app, or let's say something from the e-commerce sites, and you expect things to just happen.
Yeah.
You don't even give it a second thought to say, oh, they could have scale issues, or I ordered something and I got something else, and that's a problem for me. But behind the scenes, making sure that all those things don't happen is a technology mountain, right? So many things that need to happen. So from my standpoint, what's going to be, of course, quintessential is looking at how I can grow from a business standpoint. And at the same time, as we start going up the technology curve, really, how do you get to a point where you're experimenting a lot more than just meeting demand? Today, we are doing a lot to meet demand. We're doing some experimentation. I'd love to increase that experimentation, because to me, that's going to create the future, right? And that's going to create differentiation. So I think that's where my head and heart would be at, and I'm not hung up on technology now anymore. I think that's something I've learned. I think you look at quantum
Yeah.
computing, you look at which is being used significantly now in security, in the space of security, because
Yeah.
it just makes it so much more difficult to crack and stuff. More than the existing methods of security capabilities. You look at blockchain. I think immutable records of a variety of different things. It could be, for example, service contract in our case, or it could be, something where you got a device, or you got, your medical information that remains firm and embedded. And you just keep adding titles for, land registration and things like that. So
Yeah.
I think technology, many new things keep coming in. There's human brain interfaces. I mean, basically where you're just, just thinking, and with the power of thought, you're controlling things. A lot of things could fundamentally change. So to me, I'm just open to whatever comes, in the realm of thinking. The focus really right now is to broaden thinking, just to see, what you can do to even absorb, or probably even hopefully conceptualize and think of some unique ideas that can actually, go in and become what I would like to call a platform which everyone uses. Right? So yeah, I mean, if and when that happens, and I'm hoping it does, yeah, I'd also love to found a company again, found a company of my own and stuff. That'll happen. That'll all happen in good time.
Awesome. Awesome. I think the passion is extremely palpable. Like I can sort of feel it. That's excellent. Again, so I think this brings us to the end of an amazing session. I wish I could keep going on forever. I definitely would want to, maybe at some other point. Thank you so much, Aditya. So guys, if you want to sort of connect with him, feel free to reach out to him on LinkedIn. I think you can hustle your way and get his find his profile, etc. In case you want to work at Servify or his next venture, etc. Just want to stay connected with him. And again, also would love, if would request you guys to comment, share, and like, because YouTube works in a way where the more comments you have, the more viral you get. Thank you so much, Aditya, for your time. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks
Yeah.
a lot, Jayanth. I think what you're doing is amazing. Creating that light in people, and giving them that opportunity, and nudging them, pushing them, challenging them, and making them, tough at what they're doing is essential, because I think just creating that foundation of experts is essential for all of us. Probably even so much so for our very existence, right? In terms of how things are going and stuff. So yeah, I think it's a really noble thing that you're doing, and I really wish you all the very best.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It means a lot. Thanks.
Thanks. Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers.